Hey everybody, welcome back to D-Dude2611. This is your host, Derek Brownwell. Uh, some pretty interesting things are going on. It looks like we might finally get some safe ice in the area. Operative word is might. Uh, so I'm just going to take this time to go over and do some basic ice fishing tackle or better explained as stuff that I use to ice fish. Now, you can talk to a million different guys. There's guys in Canada, as you can imagine, that ice fish all the time. Uh, a lot of people ice fish in the northern part of the United States as well into Canada. Not to mention all the northern European countries. Uh, in fact, if you look at some of the different manufacturers of jigs, such as Clam and some of the other manufacturers, they actually have some, foreign kind of names for some of their soft plastics and some of their tungsten ice jigs as kind of paying homage to those people, from Iceland and Sweden and Finland, stuff like that, that are really diehard ice fishermen. But here in Northwest Indiana, we have a lot of diehard ice fishermen, and I'm one of them. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown as to what you would use uh, to just get started. All right. So, number one, might sound stupid, might sound silly, might sound crazy. Might be like, Derek, what the heck are you talking about? Why the heck is this number one on your list? But it's going to be a typical, get it at any hardware store. Place I work carries them. A lot of places carry them. Standard 5-gallon bucket. That's going to double as a seat. And believe me, once you get out there on the ice, you're gonna appreciate what I'm saying. But and also a makeshift storage thing. I honestly am what some people would call cheap when it comes to ice fishing, especially when you consider how diehard I am about it. But I mean, I don't have a sled. I don't even have a shanty. I have a 5-gallon bucket, some rods, my sonar, and I go out there and have fun. So 5-gallon bucket, storage, seat. There's even lids you can make that have cushions on it, built-in seats, basically, that you can install to the top of your bucket. To throw your fish in it, at the end of the day. So that's what I would do. Is number one. Number two is going to be an auger. Now augers, I mean, you can go for, there's literally $800, $900 augers out there. Do you need that? Absolutely not. I use a $80 auger that I got at Gander Mountain before that store kind of went kaput. But I was able to get one. Mine's a Strike Master Mora 8-inch auger, which 8-inch might be a little overkill for bluegill, crappie, and stuff, but in case I happen to hook into a largemouth, which has happened before, especially when you're fishing shallow weed beds or whatever for bluegill and crappie, it's not uncommon to get a largemouth or something out of those same locations. So having that little extra hole gives you a little bit more leeway out there. But if you're just fishing for panfish, I see guys using 4-inch augers, 6-inch augers. And then you got guys, depending on your local regulations, I believe in Indiana it's either 10, I think 10 inches is the maximum size of a hole you can have. But as always, for whatever state you're in, even if you're in Indiana, always double check the regulations because, the DNR are always going to be out there. Now, how often they would measure your hole, I can't say, but, they are out there and they're just doing their job. I know a lot of people get angry, when they get questioned out there, but those people are just doing their job. You gotta treat them with respect, and they'll treat you with respect in return. Shanty, if you're fishing real up north or even areas where it gets cold, like northwest Indiana, Shanty can be a very valuable tool. Is it necessary? No. I don't use a shanty, and my reasoning behind that is I stay fairly local with my ice fishing, and if I get too cold or whatever, I can always take off, you know? Uh, so, I mean, there's 100 different opinions on this. You'll see guys, they'll be like, oh yeah, I gotta have an ice shanty, I gotta have all that most expensive stuff, which is fine, you know? There's a lot of guys out there. Ice shanties are very comfortable to fish out of. A lot of them have swivel seats in there and everything like that. But do you need them? Not unless you really want them. So, I would mark it as an optional item for ice fishing. I would definitely say have a 5-gallon bucket. Definitely have an auger or some way to cut the ice. Uh, Shanties or ice shelters. Uh, not as required as the other stuff. Next, what you're going to want to check out is a rod. Now, I do, for those who do not know, I am a panfish diehard. I mean, I'll fish for panfish summer, fall, winter, spring, everything, boat, shore, bobber fishing, casting jigs for them, you know, I mean, a little bit of everything. If it's panfish, I'm all over it. So, this is actually, I have about 6 ice rods actually at the current time of different makes and models. But this is actually the newest acquisition I picked up. This is a tourney trail from Cabela's. Tourney trail. Got a decent reel on there. And what I have attached to it is this little, if you guys can see that, not sure how well that's picking up. This is actually a glow jig, but it's a Wonder Bread color, which is a very, very effective color. A lot of people use Wonder Bread for catching salmon and trout and stuff, and this is actually a clam ice jig, one of the Dave Gens dropper models, and this is going to be, basically that's how it's going to look to a fish, minus the waxworm or whatever kind of bait you're using. You can see how attractive that is. I mean, it's very, very attractive. I mean, just look at it. So, I mean, and these jigs, a lot of people, when they talk about jigs, they're talking lead, they're talking tin. Lead is, for many years, been the most common material for jigs, lead head jigs. But a lot of the ice fishing manufacturers today are actually going to a tungsten steel based weight, which is actually heavier than lead. So you can have a, believe it or not, this is a 1/32 ounce, and I mean, it's, if you look compared to a standard 1/32 ounce jig that you might see, you know, for crappie fishing or bluegill fishing, you know, it's much smaller because but it's the same weight, because that tungsten is more dense, it sinks quicker, it's heavier, so you can fish and get away with a much smaller profile bait or jig and still have it sink down faster. So this is actually what's called a size 14, real tiny, size 10s, size 12s, size 14s. Some people go down to a 16. But these are for panfish, basically. Bluegill, crappie, red ear, perch, if you have them in your area, rock bass, pumpkin seeds, green sunfish, long-eared sunfish. I know long-eared are more of a southern species, but you might run into one every now and then. But I mean, these are real good. And you'll catch largemouth on them too. That's a little bit of a hidden secret there. It's always fun pulling a 17 or an 18-inch largemouth out to the ice on a 3-pound line. And that leads to my next segment, which is line. When you're ice fishing, you have to look at almost like the biology of the fish. You know, the water is obviously extremely cold in the winter. You know, which means when it's cold out, they're not as active. They don't really hibernate like many other species. They're still active, but they're not aggressively feeding. They're just kind of feeding enough to get along uh, until the spring, until the water starts to warm up again. So that's actually why a lot of these baits are so small, because they're finicky fish, and if you're you know a lot of people in the summer would throw a night crawler under a bobber for bluegill, or big redworms under a bobber for bluegill and panfish. The reasoning behind going with this light tackle, and also with some of the baits we use, like spikes, which are basically maggots, waxworms, also known as bee moths, mousies, which are my personal favorite. If you have ever seen any of those baits, those live baits, you'll see how microscopic they are, in a sense, especially compared to the redworms and the night crawlers. Where this, if you put a little waxworm or a spike on there, it's a much smaller profile. So those finicky fish, especially if you're fishing a lot of lakes that are kind of heavily pressured for ice fishing, you're basically just jigging it like that. Those fish are gonna, they're gonna hit that long before they would hit a big juicy night crawler or a big redworm or something like that. Not that those baits can't work through the ice. And there's different rod lengths. If you're familiar with fishing, open water, long rods, as we call them, there's different lengths and weights of rods. It goes all the way from ultralight, which are these real noodly kind of rods, all the way up to heavy rods. And believe it or not, for ice fishing, it has the same spectrum. This is actually a 24-inch ultralight. You can get ultralights in commonly, 23 to the 29-inch range, I think they run in. This is a 24-inch ultralight. Like I tell you, this is a Cabela's Tourney Trail. And the reason I use an ultralight is because I'm pan fishing, and I really enjoy the fight of a bluegill. And a lot of times during the winter, there's such light bites. I cannot stress it enough. If you can see this rod tip here, there's times when you'll just see your line, kind of come up like that, or just barely straighten out, and that's your bite. That's it. In fact, some people even take it a step further and add a spring bobber, which is basically a spring insert that you can put through your first guide there, and that acts as, then you string your lines through it, and it basically makes an ultra sensitive tip, because in the winter these fish aren't as aggressive. Even the bluegill, which are notoriously aggressive fish, they're not going to be apt to smack the heck out of your bait. They're just going to gently kind of inhale it, and boom, you got them. So that's why I use the ultralights. And with the ultralights, you can use anything. There's guys out there that use 2-pound ice line, 4-pound ice line. I actually use 3-pound ice line, and I've caught fish all the way up to 17-inch largemouth through the ice. But 3-pound line is more than enough to handle 8 and 9-inch bluegill, and even 13 and 14-inch crappie through the ice, if you know how to play them. And that's all with the drag. You don't want to have it too tight. You don't want to have it too loose. Always check your drag. And there's a ton of different jigs you can use. These are, if you're familiar with any of the K&E baits, the stoppers, like the bass stoppers, walleye stoppers, crappie stoppers. I think they even have catfish stoppers now. This is the same company. These are glow jigs, glow moon jigs, with actually a little bit of an anise scent in them. So these look pretty hot, but that's what's going to be them. Sorry if you can't see that. Bass Pro, what they call hockey puck jigs. I ran across these a while back, this past October I think it was, and they look pretty interesting, so I'm going to try it. Again, these are actually a size 12. And each company kind of has their own, kind of size. So a size 12 from one company might not be a size 12 from another company, So But I mean, I panfish. Now, these jigs right here. Oh boy. Oh man, they are so good, man. I have ice fished for about 4 years, 3 or 4 years now, consistently. I mean every week, multiple times a week when the ice is good. And these jigs right here, these Maynard's tungsten BB grubs, they call them, in the yellow and pearl chartreuse color. These things are absolutely phenomenal on bluegill, crappie, largemouth is what I caught that largemouth on. I mean, tip it with a waxworm or a mousey or anything like that. Handcrafted in Minnesota if you care about buying American-made stuff. In upper Minnesota, believe me, they know their ice fish and stuff. So, but this is a tungsten jig, so it's heavier than a similar sized lead head jig. So if you're fishing deeper water, you can get down there faster. And a lot of these grubs, jigs, I should say, would be a more proper term, sorry about that, are actually glow jigs. And some people would wonder, well, once I fish it, why doesn't it automatically glow? That's where the light comes in. This is actually a little one that Bass Pro makes. Not trying to advertise for Bass Pro or Clam or any of these other companies, just telling you the stuff I have and just as a model to show you guys. And this is basically a little keychain light. And what you do is you basically turn the light on. I don't want to waste battery on it. You would take your jig and give it a couple flashes on there, and that should charge up your jig to glow for 20 minutes to a half hour. It varies. And then from time to time, you'll have to flash it again. But especially if you're fishing, even during the day, because when you think about it, those fish are under the ice. It's a very, very dark environment under there. There's not as much sunlight, especially if you have snow cover. If you have snow cover, it's very dark under there for those fish. So having these bright colors, even in clear water, can sometimes help those fish kind of hone in on your baits. And that is the presentation. These are some of the jigs that I use. Like I said, I'm a cheap ice fisherman. I mean, I spent maybe a quarter of what some of these other guys spend. But I'm out there, man, almost every day when the ice is good. So, I mean, I'm a diehard about it. But if you guys are out there watching this video, give me a thumbs up. Just got off of work a little bit ago and decided to make this video because I had some free time, and actually making videos has kind of become almost therapeutic to me, honestly. It's as weird as that might sound, here in 2019, but I guess I got this new iPhone, so I'm playing with some of the videos on it. So it's 26 degrees outside. I'm not going perch fishing. It's windy. I'm here. I'm with you guys, and I'm happy about it. So, catch you guys later on the next episode. And if you guys are doing anything fun, comment below what you're doing. Be safe. I'll see you next time. Good fishing, man.